Welcome to The Explainer. In our last discussion, we really dug into the idea of absolute surplus value, how capital's first move is simply to make the workday longer. But what happens when that road hits a dead end? I mean, a day only has so many hours, and people can only work for so long. Marx shows us that this forces capital to get, well, a lot more creative. It has to find a new way to grow, and that path changes everything. So here's our roadmap for today. We're going to start with the problem, the capitalist's big dilemma. Then we'll look at the brilliant solution, what Marx calls relative surplus value. And from there, we dive into the very first step in that process, the simple act of cooperation. We'll see how this creates a powerful new collective laborer, and we'll ask a really crucial question. Who gets to profit from this new power? Finally, we'll see how all of this gives rise to the concept of management as we know it. All right, let's start with the fundamental challenge. The early, most straightforward way for a capitalist to make more profit is simple, but it runs into a wall, a very solid physical wall. Okay, so remember, the production of absolute surplus value is all about stretching the workday. If a worker needs, say, 6 hours to produce enough value to cover their own wages, what Marx calls necessary labor, then every hour they work beyond that is surplus labor. That's where the profit comes from. So making the day longer, from 10 to 12 hours, directly adds 2 more hours of surplus. But you can't do that forever, right? There are only 24 hours in a day, and workers, well, they need to sleep, eat, and live. And this is where the strategy has to pivot. This slide shows it perfectly. If you can't make the total workday any longer, what's the only other option? You have to shrink the necessary part. Instead of adding 2 hours of surplus time at the end of the day, what if you could revolutionize the work itself so the worker produces the value of their wages in 4 hours instead of 6? Just like that, you've created 2 extra hours of surplus value, but without adding a single minute to the clock. This is the core logic behind the production of relative surplus value. Right, so this shift, from just making the day longer to making the labor within that day more intense, more productive, this is what really kicks off the revolutionary power of capitalism. It starts this constant, never-ending hunt for ways to boost productivity. But how does this actually happen across the whole economy? Well, it's all driven by the individual capitalist's desire for what Marx calls extra surplus value. Let's say you're a capitalist making shirts. You find a new technique, and suddenly your workers can make shirts twice as fast. The actual value of your shirts goes down, but you can still sell them at the old market price, which is set by all your less efficient competitors. That gap between your lower cost and the higher market price, that's pure extra profit for you. And that temporary advantage is the incentive that forces everybody to innovate, just to keep up. So, this brings us to the main event of Chapter 13. How does this whole process of boosting productivity even begin? You might think it starts with some complex machine or a stroke of technological genius. But no, Marx argues the first step is actually something far more basic, almost primal, just bringing workers together to work side by side. It starts with cooperation. And here, we have to be precise. Marx isn't just talking about teamwork in general. He's looking at cooperation as the specific starting point, the fundamental form for the entire capitalist way of producing things. It's the first real manifestation of relative surplus value. So, as the definition says, it's many people working together in a planned way. But the crucial part for Marx is the context. This isn't a village coming together to build a barn. This is a group of individuals brought together under the command of one capitalist. They're following a plan they didn't create to make a product they won't own. Their combined effort is, from the very beginning, a tool for capital. This is the very essence of the capitalist workshop. So, when you take these individual workers who used to work alone and you bring them together under one roof, something amazing happens. They don't just add up, they transform. They become, as Marx puts it, a single productive body, the collective laborer. And this collective laborer can do things the individual workers never could. A new social productive force is born. First, there are the obvious mechanical advantages. 20 people can lift a giant beam that one person can't. But it goes deeper. Marx says that just being together sparks animal spirits, a kind of social energy, a rivalry that makes each person work a bit harder. On top of that, you get economies of scale. You can share tools, share the cost of the building. It's just more efficient. And finally, for the capitalist, the group's output becomes predictable. The differences between faster and slower workers average out, creating a reliable, standard level of production.
This quote is just perfect. It's also easy to misunderstand. It doesn't mean more hours pass on the clock. It means the potency, the productivity of each hour is multiplied. When a capitalist combines 12 workers for a 12-hour day, what they get isn't just 12 individual days' worth of work. They get the output of one gigantic collective laborer whose power is far, far greater than the sum of its parts. 1 hour of this collective laborer's time is worth so much more than 1 hour of an isolated worker's time.
This leads us straight to the heart of Marx's entire argument here. We have this new, incredible productive power created by bringing workers together. So the question is, who owns it? Who gets to cash in on this massive boost in productivity? The answer lies in what you could call a crucial illusion. Think about it. Because it's the capitalist who guides the individual laborer, provides the workshop, and owns the tools, this new collective power, it doesn't look like it belongs to the workers who actually create it. It appears to be a natural, almost magical property of the capital that brought them together. It seems like capital itself is what's productive, not the cooperation of the workers. And here is the punchline. This is the critical point of the whole chapter. The capitalist pays for 12 individual workers, he pays their market price, but how much extra does he pay for that powerful, emergent, collective force that they create just by working together? Zero. Nothing. Not a single cent. That entire boost in productivity, the whole benefit from the collective laborer, is taken by capital for free. It is, as Marx famously puts it, a free gift to capital. Now, as soon as you have a large group of people working together on a single plan, a new job has to be created. You need coordination. You need direction. All combined social labor, no matter the system, requires some form of management. But here, Marx points out a deep contradiction in capitalist management. On the one hand, yes, it plays a necessary role. He uses the analogy of an orchestra conductor. Someone has to be there to make sure all the individual instruments play in harmony to create a beautiful whole. That's the direction part. But because this is all happening in a system built on exploitation, management takes on a second, much harsher role. Its job is also to enforce discipline, to squeeze out the maximum possible output, to make sure the most unpaid surplus labor is extracted. It becomes, as Marx says, despotic. This quote sums up that contradiction perfectly. The capitalist's control is twofold. It is, at the very same time, a function of organizing the work and a function of exploiting the workers. The two things are inseparable in this system. Okay, so let's tie this all together. Cooperation isn't just teamwork. It's the absolute foundation of capitalist production. It creates the collective laborer, this new social power that dramatically increases productivity. And this new power, it's appropriated by capital as a free gift, becoming the very first form of relative surplus value. And the whole process creates the need for management that is both a coordinator and a disciplinarian. This leaves us with a critical question moving forward. Cooperation is just the beginning. It takes workers as they are, skilled artisans, and just groups them together. But what happens when capital's relentless drive for profit isn't satisfied with that anymore? What happens when it starts to look at the work itself, to break it down, analyze it, and reorganize it from the ground up? Well, that leads us directly to the division of labor in the manufacturing system, and that's exactly what we will explore in our next explain.